We all know that person, right? The one who lets their birthday just slide by. No party, no cake, not even a mention. It kind of feels a little strange from the outside, but what's really going on in their head? Well, today we're going to dive deep into the surprising psychology behind why some people just skip their birthday celebrations altogether.
See, there's this huge disconnect between how we see this behavior and what's actually happening underneath. On the surface, it's easy to label someone as cold or maybe even ungrateful. But psychology tells a totally different story, a story that's all about independence, reflection, and a deep sense of self-awareness. So let's unpack that.
Okay, first things first, let's just bust this anti-birthday myth. This is that common assumption that if you don't celebrate, you must be against fun, or you don't appreciate your friends and family. But that idea completely misses the mark, because the real reasons are happening on a much deeper, much more personal level. And that brings us to our first really big clue. It all starts in this fiercely independent inner world. Now, it is so crucial to get this right. This isn't about being antisocial, not at all. It's about being self-reliant, which is a very different and, honestly, a very powerful psychological trait. A key idea here is something called low social dependency. So what is that? Well, it's a trait where your sense of value comes from inside you. You don't need a bunch of external praise or a big party to feel worthy, because your self-esteem is already self-contained. It doesn't depend on one specific day of the year. This independence really stands on two main pillars. First, these folks just aren't looking for external validation. Their self-worth isn't tied to being the star of the show for a day. And second, they really don't like forced social pressure. You know that expectation to perform happiness on command? It can feel incredibly fake and, frankly, just draining. So you see, it's about avoiding the performance, not avoiding the people. And that independence leads us right into our next point. For a lot of birthday skippers, the day doesn't spark a desire for a party. Instead, it triggers a completely different internal process. It becomes a quiet, private, annual review of their life. Psychologists have a name for this mental shift. It's called self-evaluation. A birthday can basically act as this cognitive trigger, kicking off a totally natural, sometimes even unconscious, assessment of your life, your progress, your goals. It's a pivot from partying to pondering. And this right here, this is the inner monologue that's at the heart of everything. Their mind is busy asking these huge reflective questions. And when you're in that headspace, a quiet day spent with your own thoughts feels way more productive and meaningful than a loud celebration ever could. This leads us straight into another core theme, and it's a big one, a powerful preference for authenticity. It's all about valuing genuine connection, whenever and wherever it happens, over some kind of scheduled, required ritual. Now, this pursuit of what's genuine kind of has two sides to it. First, they often dislike being the center of attention, not because they're insecure, but because it just feels performative. It can trigger something called social vigilance, basically a state of hyper-awareness that is super exhausting. And second, they value real connection way more than empty rituals. I mean, a deep, meaningful conversation on a random Thursday is worth so much more than 100 generic happy birthday posts on Facebook. Okay, so when you factor in the independence, the reflection, and the need for authenticity, we have to circle back to our main question. Is skipping a birthday actually a negative sign, or have we just been looking at this whole thing completely wrong? And here it is, the final piece of the puzzle. It is not about emotional detachment. Not even close. It's about something much more subtle and interesting, mental regulation. Some people's brains are just wired to want to maintain a state of balance.
Think about it like this. You have these big emotional highs, right? Like a surprise party, and they can feel great. But what almost always follows a really big high? A pretty big crash. Well, for people who prioritize emotional stability, avoiding that whole spike and crash cycle is the goal. Keeping the day simple isn't about being emotionless. It's a deliberate strategy to maintain a stable, peaceful mind.
So let's connect all these dots. When you put all this information together, what we might first have seen as strange or cold can be completely reframed. It's actually a collection of pretty impressive psychological strengths. So far from being cold or ungrateful, what we actually see is a psychological profile of someone who's got strong independence, a real capacity for deep reflection, a need for emotional balance, a deep desire for authenticity, and when you add it all up, an incredibly high degree of self-awareness. The biggest takeaway here is this. If this is describing you, it's not a flaw. Your psychology isn't weird. It just values qualities that point to a strong, introspective, and self-aware mind. You know what you need to feel fulfilled, and it might just not be a party and a cake, and that's perfectly fine. And that leaves us all with a final thought to chew on. We all have rituals we follow and rituals we skip. So take a second and think about it. What are the rituals you truly value in your life? And more importantly, what do they reveal about your own unique psychology?